Welcome to tonight's show. We do have a very fascinating guest with a dire warning for the world. Dr. Stephen Greer joins us. Now, Dr. Stephen Greer is a medical doctor. He is the founder of the Disclosure Project, which seeks the disclosure of classified information on UFOs, and he founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. But not only does he discuss the suppression of extraterrestrial information, but he also talks frequently about the suppression of alternative energy systems that could give endless free energy to every corner of the globe. And I'm very excited to be chatting with him. Dr. Stephen Greer, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Yeah. So, for the people that are not familiar with your work, and there's plenty of people, but many, many people are now becoming very fascinated with the conversation of UFOs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. We're seeing, for many years, this was a topic that was demonized. You're a conspiracy theorist if you brought this up, but now it's becoming more mainstream, I think mostly because Congress is starting to take more interest in the subject. Can you tell us a bit about that? And I know you have a big historic conference coming up, the Disclosure 2.0 conference. And does that, from what I understand, does that have something to do with some people coming forward who are going to be revealing information?
Yes, a number of things are going to happen on June 12th this year in Washington. There'll be a two-day conference beforehand, open to the public on June 10th and 11th. That's a deeper dive, but the National Press Club at 2 p.m. on June 12th. There will be a press conference with at least 5 and perhaps 6 top secret military whistleblowers with me exposing some of these projects. These are people who we have identified and who are willing to come forward with their name and likeness. Notwithstanding, some have been threatened with execution, and they will be at the National Press Club with me. They are less than 1% of the whistleblowers we now have in our archive, intelligence archive, which numbers now over 750 whistleblowers. So the Disclosure Project, which I started back in the late 1990s, was an outgrowth of me having briefed President Clinton's CIA director and members of the Senate Intelligence Committee and senior generals at the Pentagon about this issue. And they had been flatly denied access to these operations, which we could prove existed. Now, I'm a medical doctor, but I'm from partially an aerospace family. My uncle worked on the lunar module. Northrop Grumman put the first man on the moon. So I found out about some of these issues as a very young man, and subsequently began to research this as a physician, and eventually it dragged me into this whole rabbit hole. But the truth of the matter is, this conference is to further support the members of the Senate and the House that have now discovered this is all true, and that something is being hidden from them in an unconstitutional secret government program. So it is a huge expose. And one of the things we're going to also do, Kim, is to unveil this Disclosure Intelligence Archive, I'm calling it. The archive of, it's about 5 terabytes of data and government documents and witness testimony. And those are being handed over to the investigators in the Congress and in the Pentagon as we speak.
Okay, so let's dive into this a bit because this would be, the biggest, I think, and efficient government cover-up that we've ever seen in our lifetime. Maybe second to the JFK assassination, perhaps. The ability to keep such a big thing so secret. Can you first explain? I think a lot of people, the big question people would have is: are aliens and UFOs real? Is this what they're hiding? Because you also mentioned not only just what now I guess they've renamed it from UFO, which was unidentified flying object, right now to unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs, but there's also ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles as well, which is man-made. So can you kind of explain all of this and how prevalent and how real certain, how often are we seeing UFOs versus these UAVs?
Well, we actually have several 100,000 cases in the database that have been reported. There are about 4,000 cases where these objects have landed and left physical evidence, and over 3,500 pilot reports. So there's no scarcity of evidence. The question is what to make of it. And finally, after we have been working now 30 years trying to get this moved forward, the Congress has pivoted towards an official bill, a law that was signed 2 days before Christmas by the president, to allow for top secret whistleblowers to come forward. But what you're really talking about are two very separate things going on, being called one acronym. So UAP, UFO is an acronym. They're really sort of made up names that aren't, I think they're intentionally deceptive. But the reason I say that is that for decades, we've known there are two objects being seen by people and also by our military pilots. One are genuinely extraterrestrial vehicles, or the NSA calls them ETVs. The other are man-made ones created by companies like my uncle's company, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Skunk Works, Raytheon, that are so-called anti-gravity or electrogravitic craft. So when you look at CNN and 60 Minutes and all these shows that have shown the Pentagon footage from our Navy jets, F-18, chasing that object off the coast of San Diego some years ago, the Pentagon has now said, yes, it's real. It's a UFO or UAP. But where they go off the rails is, and it's not their fault, the spokespeople, they don't know this. We don't know what they are. Well, in fact, we do. And so over the last 15 months, what we've been doing is providing actionable intelligence to the investigators with the Pentagon and the Senate and the House to let them know what these are. They've been able to pursue this information and now know this is true. So this whole process is going to be stepped up dramatically in the next 6 to 12 months of disclosing this to the American public. Now, the reason it's so confusing is deliberately been obfuscated. They don't want the public to know that these have been proven to be, in some cases, of extraterrestrial origin, which, by the way, are completely non-hostile. They're concerned with our hostility. The other part of it is that the bigger secret isn't the so-called alien question. The bigger secret, frankly, is the fact that we have these objects that have been funded illegally through the embezzlement of funds through the contracting community and constitute, as Senator Inouye said, a secret government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own funding mechanism that's above the law and free from the law itself. I'm almost directly quoting from Senator Inouye of Hawaii, who has now since passed away. Now, when he said that, it was because he had discovered that this was all true. It was in the context of the Iran-Contra. But I just spoke to an attorney who was in his office after we did the first Disclosure Project event in 2001. And Senator Inouye turned to him and said, everything Dr. Greer said was true. These are real. There is a secret government that we have no oversight, none, no oversight from the president or the Congress. Therefore, it is an unconstitutional and illegal covert program that has to be unwound and unwound quickly because it is a threat to the national security. I'll be very blunt about this. It is the gravest threat to the national security, way greater than China, Russia, or Iran.
The secret government itself?
The illegal secret government.
Yeah,
now,
the illegal.
let's be clear. There are black projects. I'm working with a guy who manages the black budget of the United States. They are legal because they are overseen by the president, the National Security Council, and the Congress, the key members of Congress who are read into top secret compartmented information. However, we're talking about projects which the president and the Congress, even at the highest level, have been lied to about or denied access to. So this crosses the line into an illegal and unconstitutional activity. So that is what we will be exposing on the 12th of June. And we will prove it, by the way.
Okay, so let's back up on this a little bit. with the
Mhm.
so you're saying that there are real UFOs, so there's real alien technology,
Mhm.
and this has been replicated or used in some way by
Mhm.
this illegal secret government that's then creating man-made versions of this technology. So when would you say, from what you know, when was the first time that the UFO? When did we first get this technology from the aliens? I guess that would have.
Well, we were using what are called advanced electromagnetic weapons in the 40s that were experimental. And when we started detonating atomic and then nuclear bombs, these extraterrestrial civilizations were very concerned about that because apparently when we detonate those, it sends out a pulse, not just the electromagnetic pulse, but another pulse that some physicists call longitudinal or scalar. I won't get into this too much, but it disrupts the fabric of space-time when you're using interstellar communication and travel. Because you're not using a rocket to do this, you're using electromagnetic fields that affect gravitational waves, etc. So what happened was that there became a huge number of surveillance craft that were of extraterrestrial origin around our nuclear facilities. We then found out how we could, let's say, scramble their guidance systems and disable them so they'd crash. We retrieved them, we studied them, and after a number of years, by October 1954, we had kind of cracked the code of what is called gravity control. And that, according to the top scientist at the Naval Research Labs, who has been on my team for many years, he's since passed away, but he was in a classified vault and saw the documentation for this. So these are the sort of people we are working with who have had access and seen this proof. So I think that one of the problems is that these man-made objects are used in deceptive operations frequently. Everyone's heard about alien abductions and mutilations. Those are all being done by this covert secret government. It has nothing to do with aliens. The other thing that people hear about all the time are many of these objects interfering with, say, classified airspace. Well, most of those are our own aircraft that are anti-gravity testing our other government systems. I know this sounds like a science fiction show, but it isn't. And it has grave national security and
Yeah.
implications. Now, one of the big reasons for all this secrecy and deception is that the public already, two-thirds of the public believe UFOs are real and there are extraterrestrial civilizations out there. What they don't know is that by having these technologies ourselves, what has been kept from the public are the definitive solutions to global warming, pollution, energy, and world poverty. So let me connect the dot very quickly. One of the reasons for the secrecy is the entire macroeconomic system that is centered on the current 1800s, basically, energy system that consists of burning things, or in the case of a nuclear power plant, creating a tea kettle, a lot of steam from the heat of atomic fission to turn a generator. In reality, these electromagnetic field technologies have been called variously zero point or quantum vacuum. Those were actually being studied 100 years ago. Nikola Tesla stumbled across this, for example. And they have been ruthlessly kept secret by, to be blunt, a fascist industrial base that does not want to see hundreds of trillions of dollars of assets vanish.
Yeah.
Because if this is brought forward, on the one hand, we'd have a new civilization with no pollution and no poverty within 20 years. On the other hand, you're talking about every oil field, every public utility, all internal combustion engines, jets, rockets, and eventually surface roads being redundant and unnecessary. So it is not an overstatement to say it would be the biggest change in human civilization since we discovered fire in the wheel, right? So
Yeah.
these are consequential. So I once said to Lawrence Rockefeller when I was out at the Rockefeller Ranch, he said, oh, no aspect of life on Earth would be unchanged if this comes out. And I said, yes, Lawrence, that's why it's been kept secret. So it's not because it's trivial, because it has such profound implications. The problem with the secrecy is that when it began, it was under constitutional oversight by Truman and early on Eisenhower. By 1956 to 60, Eisenhower lost control, as did the Congress. At that point, this became, frankly, a rogue and unconstitutional operation, and has gotten worse and worse and worse. Since I briefed the first CI director for Bill Clinton, R. James Woolsey, in 1993 to now, the situation has gone from bad to worse to now approaching catastrophic. So this prompted me to leave my medical career and try to fix this problem as a non-governmental organization, which is what we are.
Mhm. Okay, so of the percentage of the sightings that we've seen, and the government has even come out and said, yeah, there's all these thousands of sightings that we can't tell you what it is. We don't. There's some that we could explain and some that we cannot explain. Of the thousands of sightings that have been seen, what percentage would you say are genuine UFOs from extraterrestrial beings? Which, by the way, I think it's insane. I know people who don't believe in extraterrestrial life, but I just think that's what are the there would be the for us to be alone would be, I think that to me is more of a, I mean, that wouldn't make any sense with everything that's out there in the universe, right? The chances of that,
Right,
um,
right.
but of the percentage of the aerial phenomenon that people have seen, what percentage would you say is man-made by these real shadowy, deep secret military contracts? And how many of them would you say are actual extraterrestrial?
Of the ones that are legitimately unknowns, I would say, and that are not a misperception of something like a planetary body or an asteroid, but the ones that are legitimately unknown, I would say probably about 70 to 80% of them are ours, man-made. And
Okay.
a big minority of them are of extraterrestrial vehicles. And one of the things we're going to show at the National Press Club from the top secret witnesses that we have debriefed is the contrast between an extraterrestrial vehicle and how it appears and a man-made one. We're going to have a whole series of images based on photographs, video, but also people who worked in classified facilities who own both man-made ones and the extraterrestrial ones, so people can get a sense of how you can distinguish between them. And one other comment, when you said the government says this and the government, well, which government? So what I have found, I think a lot of people say, oh, there's a Pentagon spokesman, or they had these hearings last year and recently with someone from the Pentagon up at Congress. Those people are not read into these projects, means briefed on them. So what they are doing, they're starting from scratch every time a new investigation begins. This is what we're trying to stop, this crazy cycle. So, every president, Congress turns over. There's no institutional memory of this because the projects that are running it literally are so illegally run in secret that the presidents come and go and Congress people come and go, whether it be senators or House, and they are not read in ever. Now, what we're doing now is getting them that information in this intelligence archive, which we've collected over 33 years. And like I said, I have personally met with over 1,000 of these whistleblowers over the years.
Wow.
It's been a terrible experience for me personally, frankly, to learn all this. But the other thing to remember, I have briefed a general who is the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Patrick Hughes, and also the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. These men were very desperate to find out about this issue. But when they inquired about them, they were either told nothing or threatened.
Hmm.
So, and we're talking people at the highest level of the Pentagon. So are there people in the Pentagon who are part of this a corrupt enterprise? Yes. But those are the people that are the problem. Many of your flag officers and commanders, they don't know anything about this, just like the chairs of the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services Committee had not been told anything until recently. So these are things that are real. That dynamic is dangerous in a democratic republic where the government is supposed to know about very sensitive information, but also be authorizing these sort of activities. And I can assure you they are not. This is not something, your high school civics lesson, throw it out. I mean, that has
Yeah.
completely been upended, which, by the way, is why Kennedy and Eisenhower both warned of this extreme secrecy being a risk to our democracy. They were very clear about it.
Yeah, well, and this is probably why we can't get an audit out of the Pentagon, and why $1
Mm-hmm.
trillion seems to have disappeared. Right? Oh, we don't know where that
Mm-hmm.
went. Well, it sounds like maybe it went to projects like these, which is what many of us
It
suspect.
is.
So, why is it that the United States, is it just or I guess I should ask the question, is it just the United States that has this technology, that has the UFO, the original extraterrestrial UFOs, that then where they were able to siphon this sort of technology out of? Is it just our country?
So take the sort of the paradigm or dynamic I just explained about there being these sort of two parallel governmental operations. Take that and replicate it across the planet. That's what you're dealing with. So the same dysfunction that arose here has been replicated in the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, frankly, Russia, China, Brazil, France. Now, how do I know this? Because I've met with senior people in all those countries, including the ministers of defense of Great Britain, Canada, and Australia. And they similarly knew there were projects and had heard going up, but they were not allowed access or oversight. Similarly, we've met with people from Russia and other countries. France, I personally put together materials for when Sarkozy was president of France for his Ministry of Defense. And they were in a similar situation. So I think that this is a problem that unfortunately is global. And so this global group that, let's say, absconded with this information and the technology, it's not just US. Now, the crown jewel of operations, admittedly, are in the United States and to an extent Canada and the UK, because we're the biggest military power, the wealthiest country, we have the most secrets, and we have enough space where things can be hidden. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that you will see on June 10th, 11th, and 12th, we're going to unveil what I call the top secret facilities list. And these are the places, the underground and some above ground facilities in the United States and a few overseas, that we have top secret whistleblowers that have identified where these activities are going on. This is being provided to the Congress and the White House and the Pentagon. It is also going to be disclosed to the press and to the American people. We have it. It is a guide map to pretty much where most of the key activities are located.
Yeah, I mean, when you explain, what I'm really fascinated about, especially right now with the geopolitical situation we've got going on, is that you said that the original extraterrestrials came down because they noticed that we were setting off nukes, and they were like, "Wait a minute, these
Mm-hmm.
people are going to blow
Yeah.
themselves up." And so they, somehow interfered in this. I remember watching, I
Mm-hmm.
believe, one of your films that really kind of went over this interference, which I thought, oh my gosh, are they coming to save us? And
Right.
as we are potentially on the brink of another nuclear war, do you think that they would interfere and intervene? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
These civilizations have multiple interests. One is the environment of the earth. That's their number one concern, because there apparently has been observation involvement that goes back millions of years. Number two, these technologies, and unfortunately, the nuclear ones are, in a sense, the least of it. The longitudinal or scalar electromagnetic weapons are more dangerous, and nobody knows what those are. I mean, we're going to have a physicist explaining this to the public in Washington in June, who is a PhD physicist who understands and has worked on those projects. So those civilizations from other star systems not only are concerned about what we're doing, but what are the implications? Because we're such narcissists. Humans are completely self absorbed. But if you're looking at this as an intelligent civilization that have seen planets come and go like this before, they know that you reach a point technologically where we, humans, are a threat to them. This is the problem. It is not. People are very mistaken to think that technology has stood still for 70 years since we recovered and studied extraterrestrial material in the 40s. Nothing could be further from the truth. So the reality is these covert human programs are a threat to all life on Earth, but they're also a threat to these other civilizations. Now, they have been completely peaceful and restrained. Obviously, a civilization that's hundreds of thousands to millions of years more advanced than we are could end this whole operation very, very quickly. But this isn't their way. I mean, I think they're incredibly advanced intellectually, spiritually, and I might say socially. So they know better than to do that. It's, you know, they're not so stupid that they would stumble like we did into Afghanistan for 2 decades, thinking we're going to impose Jeffersonian democracy by force on a feudal society. You know, so you have to look at this sometimes through the perspective of an extraterrestrial civilization and how we might be viewed. But when you cross the nuclear threshold and then you cross these other thresholds of gravity control, the entangled quantum universe and weapon systems that can travel beyond the speed of light, which is what we're talking about, that humans have, then humans become a problem, not just for ourselves, but for others. So there is an enlightened self-interest on their part as well, as I understand it. Not that they're
Okay.
hostile, but as I've said many
Hmm.
times, they're concerned about our hostility, frankly,
Hmm. Well,
and
and
our
I
primitiveness.
suppose, is it possible that I know that that objects have been spotted all around the world,
Mhm.
but the ability for the U.S. to get access to it, is it, you know, do you think that they're monitoring the, or at least back at that time, especially during the time of, you know, World War II and whatnot, that they were, and after that, they were mostly monitoring us because we were the ones with the nukes. I mean, there weren't very many, if any, other countries at that time that had a nuclear program. I don't think the others kind of started a bit later, 60s. I think is
No,
when
no
France
one
got their
had them.
nukes. Okay, at that
Well,
time. So they
actually,
were
we detonated the first atomic bomb in
right.
1945 at the Trinity site in White Sands, New Mexico, and then dropped 2 of them on Japan, as everyone knows.
Yeah.
But shortly after that, that proliferated across to the Soviet Union and then eventually elsewhere. Uh, and then became not just atomic, but then thermonuclear, which were hydrogen bombs. But the ET surveillance of these operations began even before we detonated because they knew what we were on the path to doing.
Hmm.
Frankly, it began. Certainly, there is record of one crashed extraterrestrial vehicle from the early 40s. There was one then right after we detonated the first atomic bomb. There's a book that's come out from a colleague of mine, Paula Harris, that was found out near the Trinity site, an ET craft that was in August of 1945. Now, remember, the disabling of these craft, because they're totally electronic and electromagnetic, once you have discovered, as Tesla began to experiment back in the 20s and before with these scalar longitudinal electromagnetic waves, you can put them into a radar system. So what happened, if you look at the FBI document we have that we got and released, it's become the most viewed document on the FBI website, and it's in our book, Unacknowledged, and also our documentary, Unacknowledged. And it describes from a field agent from Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, that we had a, quote, new radar system. Now, radar is often used as a euphemism for both a passive system to track aircraft, but an active warfare system that's embedded in the dome or in the radar system. So this had gotten switched on, and 3 of these ET craft malfunctioned and crashed. One of them wasn't found until 1951, way out in the mountains, but 2 were found immediately. That is true. But it wasn't like they can go through interstellar space and can't find their way across New Mexico in a thunderstorm. No, it was because we had developed one of these weapon systems.
Hmm.
So again, this is because the US military covertly wanted to acquire those objects, study them, figured out how they work, and get a technological edge. It was all about technology and getting an edge militarily. And to quote Senator Barry Goldwater, who ran for president in 1964, when I was at his home, he said, excuse my language, this is how we spoke routinely. It was a goddamn mistake then and a goddamn mistake now that this was ever kept secret and run by the military. It should have always been the province of scientists and diplomats, not the military and the CIA.
Okay, so if the military industrial complex has this technology, why are they not? I mean, you think that we would see more of this. We're at war all the time. They would be deploying this type of technology against Russia, China. Why do you think that they're not seemingly using the technology at this point?
They have been used, but it's been very covertly, and we have a number of witnesses who have seen these objects used very, very quietly in theaters of operation, including the Middle East and the Gulf War, and originally, and the Gulf War, and the more recent one, as well as Vietnam. Now, the problem becomes quickly the folks who are keeping all this secret greatly benefit, the war profiteers and the warmongers and those who want to control people through fear and division, frankly, they benefit from this endless war scenario. The big trump card that they're planning on playing, which is what we're trying to warn the public about and the president about, is their goal in the long run is to eventually present a threat from outer space, a so-called alien threat, as Werner von Braun stated. He invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler. He would know. And that would become a way to unite the world, not in peace, but around a global military junta, as it were,
Yeah.
that would control the not just one country or an alliance of countries like in the Cold War or today, but the whole world would be united in this way, but not in something that would be positive,
Right.
evolutionary, and peaceful, but in something that would be centered on war, conflict, and fear. This is the big dynamic everyone needs to understand, and this is what we're trying to head off. This is the central purpose of the Disclosure Project and the work we're doing. Now, to get to that conclusion, you have to learn a lot of these other facts and see the evidence, which is why we've created this intelligence archive, 5 terabits of data that we're now handing off to the US government.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So you're saying that they didn't want to use this next level technology because it would end wars too quickly, and they make too much money off the wars the way they are. So they like it. And
Mhm.
but when it
But
comes to a threat
remember,
from outer,
there's
yeah,
something else that I just correct you there.
yeah,
If they were to use it so it was acknowledged, then everybody would say, well, how is that operating? And if that was asked, it would be answered. If it's answered, it's the end of oil. It's
right,
the end of
okay,
Exxon. It's the end, okay, it's the end of coal. It's the end of solar panels, by the way. It's the end of Tesla motors, because you don't need 900 pounds of lithium ion batteries in a car. You would
yeah,
have an electromagnetic generator based on this technology that would run a 500 horsepower motor. It would never be plugged in, and off you would go. Now, Nikola Tesla had discovered some of this, and he called it the infinite energy field. And that's why, on June 6th, we're releasing a movie called The Lost Century that is going to document all the way back from the late 1800s, early 1900s to now, these technologies, how they've been suppressed, how they've been misused, but also very hopefully a glimpse into the future, Kim. What does the future look like when we're no longer based on scarcity and using these fossil fuels and nuclear power or very expensive solar and wind systems? Which, by the way, solar. I have the biggest solar farm legally allowable in the state of Virginia for a private property. It won't run this house I'm in. It
mm,
won't. Absolutely won't. So that's a non-solution. And I know environmentalists say when I say that, but these other technologies are a real solution, and they are already in existence. So since they're extant, but they're in a box that needs to be pried open, it is incumbent on all of us who are concerned about the future and the environment and poverty and humanity to see that happens for peaceful purposes, not for military
yeah.
purposes.
So it's all about protecting money. There's too many people that are too wealthy off of the current ways, the current economic way that things are. Now, I want
Mhm.
to get to this lost century because I actually attended your conference in Santa Monica
Mhm.
where several months back, where you really went over the
Mhm.
suppression of alternative energy systems and even the murdering of people who've had
Mhm.
new
Oh yeah.
technologies. They come out with something new and going to go public with, it's going to change the world. It's going to really be innovative, and we won't
Right.
have to rely on these older technologies for energy. Can you explain a little bit more about that? That is to me so fascinating. It all ties in together, as you mentioned, that it's this. If they find the technology and then they just keep it
Mhm.
from us so that they can keep making money the way they've been making money.
Mhm. Yeah, so let's talk about the fundamental energy source that would allow a UFO, like you've seen on CNN, to zip around it, and non-aerodynamically. Now, the Pentagon has acknowledged there's no jets, no rockets, and no heat. So there's certainly no nuclear plant on those objects.
Like the little
How
Tic
are
Tacs,
they
the
moving?
Tic Tacs that
The
are
tic
going
tac.
that yeah, okay, the little white looks like a
Yes.
Tic Tac that.
hmm Yeah, that tic tac is made by the Lockheed Skunk Works, and I can show you the facility that it was launched from. We have a picture of it. You will see it on November 12th.
So these
Okay,
have
this
no.
is this is
Yeah.
case closed on this nonsense going on in the media, by the way. So, but the point is the energy field from which it is drawing the power to move like that was quantified decades ago. Now, Nikola Tesla and even Maxwell in the late 1800s began to discover the effect. It really wasn't quantified and described properly by physicists until really Dr. Casimir in the 1950s, although he postulated it in the 30s. But this was actually settled science, the quantum vacuum and zero point energy field. Now, you're not going to learn this at MIT and Caltech because it all got classified. But the point I'm making is this has been around a long time. So inventors and electromagnetic experimenters and engineers have come across this effect where you put an electromagnetic current into a certain type of material, a crystalline or what have you, and you get more power out than you put in. And it's not
Mhm.
magic. You're drawing from this, what's called zero point energy field. To give you an idea how vast it is, a coffee mug, the space inside a coffee mug, that much space, has enough potential energy to boil off all the oceans of the earth, that much
Wow.
power
Okay.
embedded in that amount of space. So it would run the planet in perpetuity without pollution but also it'd be free once you have one of these objects built. So when people have discovered that, there have been corrupt interests that have corrupted the patent office and other agencies that have seized them. And in some cases, there have been hit squads that have killed the inventors. I personally know more than one person who has been killed because they had this technology. So, what we're proposing is that this technology gets developed and released open source, not through a patent and with no secrets, in a laboratory that is live streamed, that the whole world is watching, and it's released freely to every scientist and lab in the world. So that's our other objective we're working on, is to create a new energy lab that would be completely open source, like GitHub is for software.
Yeah.
And the reason that has to happen is that if you try to do it any other way, by the time you go through the legal and business and patenting and intellectual property process, it will already be seized. If not by skullduggery, by a national security order. I know a guy who had one. It got, in fact, we showed it at that presentation. He had one of these devices, and the patent office put a national security order on it and said, "This is a matter of national security." Now, what national security? Whose security? Big oil or the American people and the earth? You have to ask, how extensively have these national security laws been abused and corrupted? And that is a huge problem. And it's at the core of the UFO secrecy and these technologies. It's all part and parcel of the same problem.
Yeah, I mean, I guess their excuse would be, well, some foreign, adversary would get access to this technology and then they could harm us. And so that's why it's national security, right? And they say that about a lot of things that ultimately are just meant to give people prosperity. But they say, well, no, but that prosperity could be used for nefarious reasons. And so we have to stop you from having it. And that's
Well,
kind of
actually,
seems to
they're
be the
right
message.
about half of it. Let me explain where they
Hmm.
are correct. And people may not like to hear this. Things that fly at 300 to 400,000 miles per hour, man-made, that is a missile delivery system. You do not want a terrorist in Mogadishu launching something from there that arrives in 30 seconds over Los Angeles,
Hmm.
right? So there are national security implications for the propulsion part of this, not for the stationary energy, like for your house. So there, again, the devil's in the details, as always. So what we're advocating is a release of the technologies that would save the biosphere and end poverty in the world in 10 or 20 years. The things that fly really that we have do have implications for warfare. And
Yeah.
until the world, but here's the chicken egg, until the world becomes just and peaceful and abundant, there's always going to be growing conflict. So the one area of technology, energy generation, has to come out first.
Hmm.
Then, once we become somewhat stable and socially civilized, a level one civilization, as Michikaku calls it, then we can become more safely release these technologies, because
Yeah.
right now the technologies that are flying, those obviously have serious implications for warfare. So we have to become a level one peaceful civilization before those are widespread, unless they're governed or controlled very, very, very carefully. And that would be a global regulatory issue, because if you could not allow some rogue element. Now, here's a scary thought. The worst fascist, sociopathic group and people in the world that have no regard for humanity or the rule of law have those technologies now. This is the danger. This is why I'm saying to you unequivocally that this issue is the gravest threat to the national and world security we have ever seen, that is unacknowledged. It's simply not being talked about properly. And we need to elevate that conversation quickly.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, when you look at even Iran, for example, we say to them, well, they can't have nuclear power because then they'll have nuclear bombs,
Mhm,
right? I mean, that's kind of the
mhm,
so then
mhm,
I suppose the thought would be, well, we can't have electromagnetic energy because then we would have electromagnetic bombs, right? That would be um, so what's interesting about that then is, and I can understand why, I see your point now of why our military, if they have this, since they do have this technology, you're saying why they wouldn't then make weapons and use them is because for the same reason how we got this technology was we downed
mhm,
an alien aircraft and we were able to siphon the energy out of it, or siphon the technology
mhm,
out of it. So if we then shoot off this type of technology to a foreign adversary, then they would then pick it apart and say, oh, now we have it, right? So that would be the
mhm,
reasoning, I suppose, of not firing off weapons that then would be disruptive to the entire economic ecosystem that we're under right now. But I wonder, with this new type of energy, if it would be similar to nuclear. We don't let countries just enrich uranium for fear that they're going to become nuclear, they're going to get nuclear bombs. So we export, right? We say, well, you can't have this, but we can export certain amounts of it to you. Do you think
mhm.
that this country would find a way to make a bunch of money off of this type of technology, right? And
It's
export it out?
actually here's the thing. I mean, the things that fly, that the so-called anti-gravity, those are very complex. It took a long time and a huge amount of money to perfect what's called gravity control. Um,
Hmm.
but something that will sit like your heat pump, or in a closet running your house, or under the hood of your car running your car, those are not complicated. They are not weaponized. They're not something that lend themselves to weaponize. So this is why I'm saying there's a clear distinction between things that fly, anti-gravs, and something that would sit and run your city, your house, your country, people in the impoverished world that are cutting down rainforests to make charcoal. These are systems that are safe. They are not expensive, and by the way, they are not complicated to make or manufacture. which
Mhm.
means that if we can get them out of the box in an open source way with no intellectual property or patent holdbacks, those will go worldwide very quickly, and we will see a complete change in the fortunes of not only the earth and environment, but the body politic, because poverty around the world and the whole have and have nots dynamic does not redound to peace. It creates tensions, resentments, and a never ending attempt to fight with each other over scarcity. So this is something that is not beneficial to the long-term fortunes of humanity. So we need to start looking at this in a very, very large way, from
Mhm.
a deep perspective, but also wisely understand that we need to walk using free energy before we levitate and fly with anti-gravity systems. So
Mhm.
the point I'm making here, and it's a false equivalence to say that the ones that are electrogravitic and the ones that are be free energy, let's call it 0 point, have the same risk profile. They don't. In fact, the electromagnetic energy systems would be less damaging than an oil tanker going down the road running into your house, which does happen. As an emergency doctor, I've seen plenty of people in accidents involving petroleum that blow up and gas. So I think we have to look at this. There is a risk and reward to everything, but ultimately, the earth is not going to wait around forever for us to catch up with this lost century. That's why I called this film The Lost Century, and then in parentheses, how to reclaim it. How do we make up for that lost 100 years by the corrupt fascist industrial interests that have co-opted the government and co-opted institutions? How do we make up for that lost 100 years? We can,
Yeah.
but it's got to be thought through very carefully, and it has to be worked through with some very by people who know what they're doing, frankly, and understand the subject. But this is why education on this issue has to happen rather quickly, because
Mhm.
the Earth isn't going to sit around forever while we destroy it.
So you're saying that really these alternative energy systems aren't even really threatening. It's just that they're threatening to the current economic system, and that's why they then label it national security. It's not really that these are going to be
Mhm.
used as
Yeah.
weapons. That it's a different
It's
technology.
yes, it's well, here's what it really is. Forget about money. Let's talk about what money really is. It's power. So we're talking about macroeconomic power on a global scale. The
Mhm.
petrodollar. Why is it called the petrodollar? It's based on petroleum and all the trade. So, excuse me. So when you start looking at this in the aggregate, it's over $1,000 trillion in
Yeah.
assets that would be affected. And the U.S. federal government budget is what, 5 or 6 trillion. Most of it's entitlements. So this is a very huge problem, but it's gotten out of hand. The environment and world poverty. 3 billion people have no means of even cooking their food right now, literally on Earth. Look it up. The Economist just had a whole article about it. So how do we get out of this death spiral that both the environment and humanity are in? We have to find a way out. There is a way out, but we have to do it wisely and step in an orderly way. Will there be winners and losers? Yes. I mean, obviously, if you own an oil field, oil will be useful for plastics and petrochemicals, but not energy, which is a very
Mhm.
small percentage of all the oil that's pulled up out of the ground, etc. But so what's the answer to that? Well, people who work in those industries need to be retrained and financially supported until they can be deployed to these new technologies. So that has to be done compassionately, because otherwise you're going to throw a lot of hardworking people working in oil fields, coal mines, public utilities, etc. So we have to develop a global Marshall Plan, is what I call it, a very thought through plan to bring these technologies out, but then also figure out the best way, humanely, to provide a soft landing for people who would be displaced economically. Now, let's remember that as that happens, the half of the planet that's in horrible poverty is going to go boom. It's going to grow very rapidly, because one
Mhm.
of the big barriers to the growth of the developing world, or third world, as some people call it, is the cost of energy, the lack of utilities, the lack of power lines, and the cost of the fuel that it takes to run it. So when you have systems that are putting out quote unquote free energy. Once you have the system in, there's no cost to the energy, there's no fuel. This is a huge game changer that's very good for 99+% of all of humanity. So long as we take care of the people who are by no fault of their own hurt, as for people who've already made trillions of dollars on the current system for 150 years, to me, they've had their day. It's time for a new day.
Yeah, they're clawing on, it looks like, for dear life. And so I kind of want to
Yes,
go back
that's
to
it.
that, because you're saying that there would be, maybe, what would be good as a Marshall Plan that would help the entire world with this new energy source, with any new, with free energy sources. But they're instead, as you mentioned, gearing up, and we've seen already evidence of this with the Space Force, right? They're gearing up
Mm-hmm.
for war with aliens,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how they're going to, when
Right.
the endless wars around the world end, they're going to look to space. How do you think they're going to fake then an alien invasion? I mean, in order for us to have war with aliens, the aliens would have to be on the other side of that war, right? I mean, so
Well,
how?
no, this is, at the Pentagon, what this is called a deceptive indication and warning. Now, that's military speak for a false flag. So,
Right,
just
okay.
like in the Gulf War, Cheney and his henchmen concocted that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction when he didn't. He sent Colin Powell up to the United Nations as the Secretary of State with a false information, which his chief of staff has admitted was the biggest mistake of their entire military and political lives. The Vietnam War was based on our staging a fake attack on our vessels in the Gulf of Tonkin, which stampeded the public in a rage that stampeded Lyndon Johnson to vastly expand that war. Now, what if a group like who we are, expose this deception before they pull it? That's one of the, so as a doctor, the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think it's important for us to expose the means they have to stage it, the intent they have to do it, and therefore, it's like the Who in the 70s, we won't be fooled again. But if people don't know that these capabilities exist within these illegal secret government projects, they will be fooled again. And that's why knowledge is power. If we get this information out to enough people, this can be averted. I wouldn't have left my medical career if I didn't think this was fixable. Now, it may be a Hail Mary pass, but at the same time, what are you going to do? Do nothing when you have this information? I feel a moral obligation to do everything I can. But we need a lot of people helping us with this. To be honest with you, it's a very daunting undertaking and been rather lonely. But you have to put the people together to do it, because
Yeah.
and luckily now we have every week now we have 2 or 3 top secret whistleblowers coming forward to us, which is very exciting. And by the way, anyone listening, if you or someone has been involved in these covert programs at any level, please contact us at our website, drstephengreer.com.
I want to ask you talk about one last point here. And this is,
Sure.
you've mentioned that there are people who appear on mainstream shows and they're not telling the truth. They're essentially maybe useful idiots. And I think I want to bring this up because the topic of UFOs are now, like I mentioned, much more mainstream, becoming much more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
The government is admitting to it. We're seeing Space Force. We're seeing there's people coming out and they're on the news and they're
Mm-hmm.
talking, or they're on talk shows.
Right.
And you've said that a lot of these people are essentially useful idiots, and maybe they would then help. I mean, would these be the people that they use to try to help bring forward this idea of okay, yes, there is, the government's acknowledging there's something out there, and now we have to
Mm-hmm.
build military and protect Earth from this this outer
Mm-hmm.
space. Now we can make a lot of money off of that. Tell us about those useful
Sure.
idiots.
Oh, yes. Well, many of them are actually paid operatives of these clandestine covert programs. I know who they are, and I know how they're being paid and how much they've been paid. I'm not going to muckrake here, but some of them are people who just have simply been provided false information and are parroting it. So this comes under the adage, a little knowledge is a very dangerous thing. But nevertheless, to the extent that this issue is now acknowledged by the government is real, that the objects, the UFOs and UAPs are real. It opens the door to then have a group intercept that narrative away from it being a threat from outer space to, and I tell people, yes, the UFOs are a dire threat, but not the ones that are extraterrestrial. The ones that are a threat are the man-made ones. And
Mm.
I tell people, don't take my word for this. The first, well, he was second, but he was really the first acting director of the CIA, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, wrote to the New York Times in 1961 and said, and I quote, "The secrecy around UFOs is a threat to the national security." And how did he know that? Because he knew that between 1947, when the CIA was formed, and late 50s, during Eisenhower's second term, this entire operation got hijacked. There was basically a quiet coup d'etat in this country and elsewhere. And so the secrecy around the issue is a threat to the national security. And I tell people, don't take my word for it. If you won't listen to the early first acting director of the CIA, who are you going to listen to? So what we try to do is put together the proof, the evidence, the actionable intelligence, and the sources and methods. Methods I kind of keep quiet, how people come to me, but the sources that are willing to come forward to make this case, which is the best we can do, because we're a non-government. I don't have any legal authority whatsoever, except a concerned private citizen.
But what are the things that these people would say, like when they're on interviews and they're saying, "Yeah, UFOs are real." What are they saying that's different, or that would make them useful or kind of misleading
Mhm.
people versus like the
Well, what
people
they're
that are
saying is
telling the truth?
well, there are four big lies centrally. They'll say that these are real, which they are, one truth, but we don't know what they are, a lie. They're a threat, inferring that the extraterrestrial vehicles are a threat. They're
Mm,
not. That we don't know how they fly, which is false, totally false. And the big one, we don't have anything that could move like that Tic Tac, when in fact, we're going to prove and can prove through direct witnesses who worked on these systems at Raytheon and Lockheed Skunk Works and Northrop Grumman that in fact we have them, we do know how they work, and they are being run by an illegal secret government project and
mm.
para-governmental corporate project. So that is, so there's only one thing they're saying that's true, and that is that the UFOs and UAPs are real. The rest of the points that they keep making, it's almost like a talking point in a political campaign. If you look at the coverage in the news, you look at 60 Minutes, you look at Fox, you look at CNN, all the other points that follow from that are the false narrative. And that's what needs to be corrected.
Yeah, well, Dr. Stephen Greer, thank you for being here and discussing this with us. And I know your work is new to a lot of people that are watching, but very, very fascinating. And you've got this conference. You do have the Historic Disclosure 2.0 conference that is happening June 10th and 11th. Is that right, in DC? And then what's on the 12th? The National Press Conference?
That the National Press Club, we're going to have a 2 hour press conference at 2 p.m. It will be streamed all over the world, and we will have these top secret new whistleblowers there, as well as the intelligence archive unveiled, as well as an attorney who will be there. And we will be announcing the launching of a civilian RICO action against these clandestine operations unless the U.S. government fixes it fairly soon.
Yeah, and you've got the movie coming out, the Lost Century film. This one is going to be very fascinating, especially maybe some people feel like, well, they're not quite ready to get into the world of unidentified aerial phenomenon, but they are interested in energy and they
Mhm.
are linked ultimately. But I think the when I went to your conference about energy was extremely fascinating and eye opening and completely believable. I mean, all you have to do, is just look at how our country runs. Look at the industrial
Mhm.
complexes that are out there and how much money
Right.
there is involved, and how much people will
Right.
do to suppress, lose, or to thwart off losing that money. So very, very fascinating stuff. Can all of this be found more information on your website, the film Lost Century, as well as the conference?
Yes, and the Lost Century, I think it's available for pre-order now, but it will be available all over the world on June 6th. So, June 6th, the film drops, and then the conference in DC, the 10th and 11th, and then the National Press Club event on the 12th. So we've timed this so that it really puts a lot of information quickly out to the public. And
Great.
I appreciate you helping with this. And oh, by the way, someone told me there's an actor named Russell. Is it Russell Brand who's interested in this?
Yes.
I should do something with you guys
Yeah.
all together. It'd be fun.
Yeah. 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 I'll definitely
Maybe you
mention
can.
to
Maybe you can.
Russell.
Maybe you can.
I will.
Maybe you can
I'll
hook us
introduce
up.
you to Russell for sure, because he's
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
somebody I think you should talk to about this for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. So
He's a fascinating
I'll
guy.
reach out to him and let him know.
All
But
righty.
yeah, this is great. Thank you so much, Dr. Stephen Greer. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, Dr. Stephen Greer is such a fascinating guest. Really enjoyed that conversation. All right, we are about wrapping up for the show. First, we do have a great new sponsor for you. If you struggle to get a good night's sleep, if you're dealing with too much stress and you could use a little calm in your life, if you suffer with pain and discomfort, especially after physical exercise, if you're frustrated with a health concern that's not getting any better, then try CBD. There's a great source that I trust. This is where I've been getting my products, cbdistillery.com. CB Distillery has over 2 million satisfied customers with a wide range of excellent high quality products. 90% of customers reported they sleep better with CBD. 81% said CBD helps with stress. 80% said CBD helps with aches and pains after physical activity. So get on the right path. You can use my code. I've got a discount code for you, 20% off, which is a really great deal. Just visit cbdistillery.com and enter my name, Kim, and you're going to get that 20% off. There's no prescription required for CBD. So just visit cbdistillery.com and use that promo code Kim for 20% off. And I've got, I definitely have a tough time sleeping every night. And so CBD, that's a product I've been using, as well as I got some for my dog. She's got some arthritis. She's 11 years old. She's a shepherd. So seems to be working. People give rave reviews on CBD. So give it a shot. You don't need a prescription. Just visit cbdistillery.com.